Morning, YouTube. Well, today I stopped along Route 20 at the Museum of the Fur Trade. It's been open since 1955, and it covers the whole fur trade from uh, before the Pilgrims came over, right up into recent times. But behind me is a uh, fur trading post that was set up by James Bordeaux back in 1830s, I think, and it operated for 40 years. And this is the actual site. The original one collapsed in around 1880, and but they did the archaeological dig here and rebuilt it, and this is actually what it would have looked like. So let's take a look inside. I always like to see the actual, one way the notches almost like dovetails, and then so this would be the trade room, and this would be a sort of a representation of everything that they would have sold here, and some of the prices. And they would have sold tobacco, whiskey, brass wire, bells, tomahawk heads, coffee, rifles, blankets. And to get an idea of some of the prices, they were basically trading back then for brain tanned buffalo robes. And let's see, get a flintlock gun, be 5 robes. A pound of vermilion was 3. A medium blanket was 3 robes. 25 dentalia shells, like the ones we saw on that, we'll see on the one dress that was 4,000. Those things would have been 1 robe to get 25 of those. 2 pounds of small beads was another robe. A knife, a robe. 5 yards of cotton print, a robe. 6 feet of that brass wire would have been 1 whole buffalo robe. 50 bullets and 1 pound of gunpowder, also a robe. So a lot of this stuff we're trading here. And the living quarters with a fireplace down here and a buffalo robe, the fur on the beds. This is where they would have stayed, right here in the trading post. And this was established by James Bordeaux for trading with the rural Sioux Indians, and he ran this from 1840 to 1849 with the help of his wife, Marie, and they ran this every winter for the American Fur Company. Then from 1852 to 1872, they maintained it as a private business and obtained goods from St. Louis and traded with the natives. After that, Francis Butcher moved here in the winter of 1872, and he did a thriving business with hostile Indians, selling the repeating rifles, ammunition, surplus army saddles and blankets. But as you'd expect, in 1876, 4 years later, the army shut him down. So, but quite the place, not real big. Like I said, it may not have been real big, but dug into the hillside like this with a southern exposure. You had the fireplace in there. Probably would have been relatively warm. Water was right down here, the creek that they named after him. And another dugout over here would have been a warehouse. So when it came time at the end of the winter, both the warehouse and the trading post would have been crammed full of robes, and then they traded, and brought in more supplies and be crammed full of supplies waiting to be traded again. So how much can you pack into a Canadian fur trade canoe? How about 3 tons of cargo, and which left about 6 inches of freeboard when it was totally loaded. So all of that would go in. And of course, every portage, you'd have to carry that and the canoe. So of course, fur trade, along came more modern traps, more vicious traps. I've heard of seal parkas made from seal intestines. I just never saw one before. And compressed tea. Easier to pack and transport that way. So, an Alaskan bear spear. 2 people hunting, you stab a bear turns towards you, your friend stabs them, and you keep doing this over and over until bear dies. But I'm thinking, I don't want to get that close. So these artifacts are date from before the fur trade, the Plains Indians. So like tobacco bags, obviously a bow and quiver, knife, war shield, man's shirt, which is amazingly decorated. And pipe tomahawks, you can see the bowl. And a man's moccasins. Some beautiful work. So, why, what was in it for the natives to trade fur? I mean, they'd used it for clothing for years, well, or centuries. Well, these were considered, more elegant, and, everybody had buckskin clothes, but to have beautiful robes like that, or blankets like this, and trade blankets. So you notice on these blankets, like 2 stripes down the middle, each one. Well, legend has it that the British tax collectors charged a tax per blanket, so the makers would make them twice as big, and then when they were bought or traded for or sold, they would cut them in half, end up with 2 blankets, way to go around the tax man. So how were those blankets shipped? Like this, in a big bale. There's 50 blankets in there. They used old or damaged blankets to protect the new ones in shipment. So blankets were referred to in sizes as points. So like a 1 point on up to a 7 point, the big one. All these colors except for that light blue were available back in the 18th century. That's a color that came out in the 1920s. So how would you tell the points? Well, by the short lines, this would be a 3-point blanket, as with that one. And that one was issued to a Minuteman in Massachusetts in 1775. So as much as they thought that the clothing that they were trading for was fancy, now we look back and go, man, the beadwork on some of this stuff was truly amazing. Especially when you consider how much work went into just making the beads or gathering 4,000 shells to make this one. Okay, this is Red Cloud. And when he died in 1909, his son sold, about a month later, sold his rifle, which we have here, and his outfit to a guy purchased it for a museum, and when the museum went out of business, sold at auction, and it was donated here. So these are some of the guns that were captured from the Indians. This one was, let's see, surrendered by Sioux and Cheyenne warriors. Showed, all kinds of repairs and stuff to hold this thing together. And this one was captured from Shawnees, and this one was taken at Wounded Knee. And how about Kit Carson's rifle? Well, that ends my visit to the Museum of the Fur Trade. Very interesting place, and added to my knowledge of fur trade in North America. And it's way over here on the western side of Nebraska. So I'll see you later, YouTube. Back on the road.